Welcome to Tokyo Game Life, a Tokyo-based video game podcast focusing on Nintendo and gaming culture in Japan's capital. Your host, Mono, here to bring you a slice of gaming life from Tokyo. It's been quite busy on the gaming front here in Tokyo. Indie game events, new shops, new games. But hey, there's only one game that really matters. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I'm joined by YouTuber Dale of Open World Japan and Dale Plays Games to throw out a few predictions about Tears of the Kingdom. Will Zelda be playable? Are there secret game mechanics? Where is Tingle? If you love rampant speculation, you'll love our chat. And in the future, I highlight the brand new arcade/entertainment center Namco Tokyo, housed in the massive skyscraper called Tokyu Kabukicho Tower. This may be a peek into the future of Japanese arcades, and I'll tell you everything about it. Let's jump right into the games with Dale and our Tears of the Kingdom predictions. Tokyo Game Life, only on the Tokyo Beat Podcast Network. For this episode, the game section is going to be a bit different. I want to talk about my most anticipated game of 2023, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I've got a lot of hopes, dreams, and some predictions that I'm ready to share. But I'm not alone. I'm joined today by a special guest. So guest, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Dale, host of Dale Plays Games on YouTube. I run a YouTube channel where I review and discuss new release Nintendo games. And just like you, I am a lifelong Zelda fan, and Tears of the Kingdom is my most anticipated game for this year as well.
Thanks for joining me. Before we start throwing out some random predictions, I need to get your Zelda street cred. What's your history with the franchise, particularly with Breath of the Wild?
When I was 8 years old, we rented Ocarina of Time for a weekend, and I played it for about 30 minutes and gave up because it was too hard for me as a child. But a few years later, 2003, I pre-ordered the Wind Waker, and I was very excited for that, and it came with a pack-in disc of Ocarina of Time as well. So I managed to play through Ocarina of Time and the Wind Waker at that time. Loved the series and have worked my way through every other Zelda game since. Only ones I haven't played are Ocarina of Ages and Seasons and Spirit Tracks. As for Breath of the Wild, I have a very special relationship with that game. That game released on the 3rd of March, 2017, which coincidentally was the day I moved from Australia to Japan. So unfortunately, I couldn't play Breath of the Wild on the release day because I was in the air. I was flying from Japan to Australia, didn't have a Switch, couldn't get a Switch for a couple of months until after I'd moved to Japan. But when I could finally play Breath of the Wild, it had this interesting parallel to my real life. I was coming home from work late at nights, my new job, my new life, just exploring that world in Breath of the Wild. And then at the same time on the weekend, I was getting used to my life here in Japan and exploring outside. So it kind of had this dual sense of discovery going on in my life, like exploring Hyrule in the game and exploring Japan in real life, and just, it had this really interesting parallel. So I'll always remember that time in my life where I was playing Breath of the Wild and exploring and getting settled into Japan at the same time.
Ooh, that's quite special. I think I have a pretty similar background to you. My first Zelda game was Link's Awakening DX for the Game Boy Color, and then I also got Ocarina of Time around the same time. And from then, I've been a lifelong Zelda fan. And yes, the only Zelda game I have not played is Spirit Tracks. And for me, Breath of the Wild is definitely one of my favorite games of all time. I would easily maybe consider it the best game ever made. The ones that I rank above it are kind of nostalgia picks. So sometimes I think, well, maybe Breath of the Wild is actually the best game, and the other games you like a bit more is just pure nostalgia. So I'm a very hardcore Breath of the Wild diehard. So I'm really excited for Tears of the Kingdom. What did you think of the latest Tears of the Kingdom trailer? And what's your hype level for the game now?
Yeah, my hype level was always pretty high. Like, there was no way I wasn't going to get the sequel to
Right.
Breath of the Wild. And something that really bothered me a little bit before the release of this trailer is the narrative and the discourse that, oh, it's just Breath of the Wild again. Oh, it's just a DLC for Breath of the Wild. And what I really liked about this trailer is that it kind of put that narrative to bed a little bit. It seems like this game is going to have as much new content as you'd expect from a new Zelda game. And just the hints at the story we get in that trailer have really made me a lot more hyped, especially seeing Ganondorf.
Hmm.
I cannot wait to see that and a brand new iteration of Ganondorf. The last time we saw Ganondorf was what, Twilight Princess, which
Yes.
is almost 20 years ago now. So it's
Wow.
exciting to see him again.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think a big part of that new trailer was that everything they showed are things you cannot do in Breath of the Wild.
Mm,
And I think that's something that maybe they kind of struggled with conveying earlier. But now I
hmm
definitely think everyone is convinced that this is a completely new adventure, a completely new experience, and one that you aren't going to feel like it's a rehash.
mm.
So we are going to share some predictions for Tears of the Kingdom. I did tell you earlier to prepare 3, but I'm sure we'll dive into a lot more than that. But I want to hear from you first. Throw out one of your predictions for Tears of the Kingdom.
Okay, prediction number one is procedurally generated sky islands.
Hmm.
The Sky Islands are obviously a big focus of the game. Aonuma has stated that the game will begin on one of these floating sky islands. And watching the trailer, you can always see these things falling from the sky. As we know, you will use the rewind ability to use them as a kind of elevator back to the top. But it kind of reminds me of rain, and the islands themselves kind of remind me of clouds. So I wonder if there will be these major big sky islands which are permanent. But if there are going to be smaller sky islands that just appear randomly, and if you go to one of them, you'll be greeted by something new and randomly generated every time. Like you don't know what materials or weapons are up there. You don't know what enemies were up there. And I think that would be a great way of keeping the game fresh and always having things to do, is that if you go up to one of these islands, you could get something a bit random each time.
Hmm.
And I've never really been a fan of anything procedurally generated. Like I didn't really enjoy No Man's Sky or anything like that. But I feel like in this world, in this sandbox, something like that would work. Having a ground area that is fixed and always the same, but if you decide to say, hey, I'm going to jump into the sky, you might get something new every time.
That's a really interesting prediction. That's definitely not something I expected anybody to say.
Yeah, that's
Um,
probably my biggest one. I thought I'd start with that
yeah,
one.
that's a great bold prediction. It's not
hmm
something you want to hear somebody else say.
Mm,
But that's quite interesting because in the Zelda franchise, we really haven't seen any sort of procedural generated material. Zelda is well known for like its crafted gameplay and its like well thought out puzzles and whatnot. So to
mm,
have some sort of randomization to it is pretty interesting. For example, like randomizers on emulators for like Link to the
mm,
Past are quite popular. So I wonder if they are kind of aware of that or they want to implement some sort of like evergreen gameplay aspect
mm.
to Tears of the Kingdom.
The only other random element to Zelda I can think of is that spin off Cadence of Hyrule that had like a bit
Oh,
of,
yes.
I think that had some random generation in there. And I feel like having these sky islands as randomly generated, it's just enough. It's not, it's
Mm.
like you said, everything in Zelda is curated and nice, but this is just a nice little extra thing thrown in.
Yeah, that's interesting. It would be quite new for the franchise and maybe
Mm,
even new for Nintendo. I can't really think of a lot of other games that have kind of procedurally generated content. And maybe they
mm.
can even patch in stuff. Oh, this week is the construct boss week and the random sky islands
Oh,
have
that's
like
a
a
great idea.
40% chance of having this. That would really make it a really almost like a live service game, which is kind of funny, but you never
Yeah,
know.
I'm not a big fan of those, but you just made me think of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, how you have the terror raids there, and they
Mm.
do events through the terror raids, and sometimes the Pokemon that appear, are event based. If they're going to do anything event based in this, that would be the way to do it. I think is having it
Mm.
up in the sky and not on the ground.
A very, very good prediction. So I think that's definitely better than my prediction, which I think is quite safe, but I'll throw it out there.
hmm
My prediction, my first one, I think there will be time travel. Now, this
Mm.
might only be in the story. I think in the story for sure, time travel is pretty much confirmed by the latest trailer. But I do think that Link will be playable in the past, at least maybe for some directed segments or some sort of straightforward limited areas. But I definitely think time travel is going to be in Tears of the Kingdom. Some of the reasons why I think this is because we see Zelda after she falls through the hole and whatnot in a completely different scene. She's wearing that white dress and she's talking to some sort of either he's like a goat or a rabbit or a dragon man. I'm sure we'll get to him later, but some sort of other creature. And it looks like she is in the past because there's no Sky Islands in her scenes. And also, it looks like she's on, people have already doxed Zelda. They figured out that she's on the Great Plateau,
Yeah.
and, the Great Plateau does not look like that. I think the whole time travel aspect will be an element in Tears of the Kingdom. It might just be like more story focused. For
Hmm.
example, Zelda's in the past and Link is in the present, and you have to figure out, how to get from A to B, how to go back to the past, or how Zelda can come back to the future. But I do think there might be some segments where we are Link and we are in the past, possibly for maybe the shrine equivalent of the game, or maybe even some dungeons where we enter, a fixed closed off area, but actually we're not in the present day. We're 10,000 years ago or even later. Then maybe some things that we do in the past can affect the future or affect the present, I suppose.
Hmm.
So somewhat similar to Oracle of Ages, but in Oracle of Ages, you just had a button that you could literally just switch between the two worlds almost. And
Hmm.
same with Link to the Past, where you can switch between the light world and the dark world. I don't think it's
Mm.
going to be that extensive, but I think there will be sections that are similar to that. So what do you think of time travel? Do you think it's possible, or is it only going to be related to the story, or is it totally bunk?
If it's not there, I will be incredibly surprised. As we've seen in a lot of the promotional footage, Link also has two very distinct looks. He
Yes.
has he has a look that looks like he did in Breath of the Wild, and now he's got this longer haired, kind of tattooed look about him. And I do wonder if that is just the same Link in two different timelines.
Hmm.
And it could be going to the past, but I think something that's interesting to notice is that in this game, Zelda has a different hairstyle than the last game. Like in the last game, she
Right.
had long hair, now she has short hair. And Link's more traditional look has mid length hair, and now this new length has long hair. So I'm starting to think if their hair has grown,
Hmm.
sorry, if Link's hair has grown, maybe that's him in the future, and we could be traveling like
Ah.
into the future and in the past, or maybe the long haired Link is the main timeline. Is that's the era of this game, and then he time travels back to the era of Breath of the Wild where he's got slightly shorter hair.
Hmm.
I think, yeah, considering that Link does have two very distinct looks, that time travel certainly must be here, unless it's just playing through two different stories in two different timelines, which would be really weird. I would say
Hmm.
time travel is here, and it is a Zelda staple too.
Right. There's quite a high percentage of games where you do go back in time. It's almost
Mm,
weird if you don't go back in time. And even a Breath of the Wild had at least the Temple of Time. So we saw that a little
mm,
bit. And especially the logo, like the Ouroboros of the two
yeah.
dragons. When you see that, you're thinking cycle, loop, past, future, all that kind of stuff together.
Mm,
And yeah, the two links thing is quite peculiar. Like, why are there two very distinct looking links? Why is one brand new and why is one the same old link we've always seen?
yeah.
And yeah, it's quite interesting. One thing I really love about the marketing of this game is that they've shown so much, yet we're still in the dark about so much of it, about how it works, about the story. So that's really exciting to me.
I love that. Yeah, I love that
Mm.
we're going in. It's just like Breath of the Wild all those years ago. We're going in not really knowing the full extent of what we're going to get, but we're still so excited. And considering we've already played Breath of the Wild, we know it's going to be as good. So, yeah, that is part of the fun, I think, is going in just really not knowing.
Definitely. All right, Dale, I want to hear your second prediction. What is your next prediction for Tears of the Kingdom?
Okay, I'm so glad you mentioned time travel because it segues quite nicely into my next
Ooh,
prediction. If you remember in Breath of the Wild, we had the champions, and then we had their kind of younger counterparts,
yes.
Tabor, Sidon, Riju, and Yonobo.
Mm.
These we know that these characters are coming back in Tears of the Kingdom, and I think their role in the story will have either direct or indirect references to the plot of Age of Calamity,
Oh,
the
really?
Hyrule Warriors spin-off game. And I think this leads nicely into the time travel idea. Have you played Age of Calamity?
I haven't, but I do know what happens. I know about the
Okay.
ending and whatnot.
Okay, so slight spoilers if you haven't played it. But in that game, it's shown to us as a kind of prequel to Breath of the Wild.
Hmm.
But then as you play it, you realize it's actually not. It's an alternate timeline in which everybody manages to defeat Ganon and the Great Calamity never happens.
Hmm.
But what's interesting in that game is that those four young heroes, Tabor, Sidon, Riju, and Yonobo, they travel back in time to the era before Ganon rose to power, and they join Link to fight Ganon off.
Hmm.
But what's interesting is that those four characters, they are the iterations from the Breath of the Wild timeline. They go from Breath of the Wild's timeline into the alternate timeline that is Age of Calamity, and then they go back into the timeline of Breath of the Wild. And I think a lot of people miss this when they play Age of Calamity because we dismiss that game as being an alternate timeline. It's not canonical. But those four characters, they come from the timeline of Breath of the Wild into this timeline, and then they go back. So they experience the events of Age of Calamity, and then they go back into the main timeline. So I wonder if, because these four characters have experienced the events of Age of Calamity, if it's going to have any impact on their role in the story of Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I think a lot of people kind of write it off as, oh, this is a non-canonical spinoff. It won't have any sort of impact. But it oddly does like take some influence from Breath of the Wild story. Like, for example, one of the villains in Age of Calamity, I believe his name is Astor, who is like a fortune teller or some sort of mage. I believe he is referenced in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah,
like
he is.
Yeah, the fortune teller found like the Sheikah Guardians under the earth. And that kind of, ironically, kind of kicks off the story. So he's a weirdly important character in the lore of this new Hyrule. And in Age of Calamity, they kind of expand upon it. But in Breath of the Wild, he isn't really focused on. And in Tears of the Kingdom, he's also maybe kind of not hinted at. But, you know, he might have some sort of role or that kind of idea where, okay, Age of Calamity did happen technically in, you know, another universe or timeline. But, you know, Zelda's a bunch of timelines going all over the place.
Yeah.
So you can really draw from anything. So that is quite an interesting prediction. I do wonder if maybe like Astor, that fortune teller, will be mentioned by name. I think that would be very interesting. Maybe if they don't take anything else, if they do mention, oh, the fortune teller is named Astor, that would definitely spark a lot of people's imagination.
Yeah, I really doubt it'll have any major plot relevance to this game, but I really hope that it is referenced either directly or indirectly, especially with those four characters. I really enjoyed that game, and I really think it does kind of fit between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and these three games are kind of like a trilogy, I think. Yeah, it's not super important to Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, but I think it is important, and it is worthy of having some kind of connective tissue, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Your predictions so far have been really interesting and unique. Mine are quite safe, but I'll continue on with my second prediction. This is related more to the gameplay mechanics. The fuse system. I believe it has some sort of special combo system that allows you to combine more than two items depending on what the item is. For example, in Mr. Aonuma's presentation, we only saw two items being fused together, correct? We saw like the stick and the pitchfork. We saw the shield and the mushroom. So he only fused two things. However, I do think that we will be able to fuse more than two things, maybe at least three, but not for every single item. Like, I don't think you can do sword and rock and then mushroom, for example. Because in the video, when he fused a rock to his shield very briefly, before that, he fused like a stick and a log to make like a log club, as it was called. Because when he tries to fuse the rock to the shield, it looks like the log club is selectable. So it looks like you could fuse that rock to the log club. So that would be three items.
Yeah, that's a good
However,
point.
he doesn't do it, but it's not like it's grayed out. However, I think like that log club, the thing he made, is a special item that becomes one instead of it being considered two different items together. I think some items, when you fuse it together, it is recognized as one singular item, and therefore you can fuse it again to another item. I don't think you can do like 4 or 5 or 6 or anything crazy like that. I believe Ultra Hand, that's where you can really just jam everything together.
Yeah.
But I do think depending on what the items are, you might be able to stick 3 things together. For example, like the stick and the log make the log club. So on that log club, you can maybe attach an axe. So you can have a log club axe. So I think the fuse system will be a bit more flexible than just A plus B equals C.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. In the second trailer, there's a very brief moment, just a couple of frames, where Link is wielding a weapon, and it does look like it's made of three different distinct pieces.
Yes, the
It,
cannon.
yes, yes, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly right. It does look like it's made of three pieces, so I completely agree with you there. Maybe at the beginning of the game, it's just fuse, and you can only fuse two. And then
Mm,
later in the game, you unlock fuse plus, and then you can do three. I wonder if
mm,
it's gated behind completion. That's also quite possible. Maybe fusing three at the beginning of the game would just make it a bit too easy, and
right.
people right out of the gate would just be fusing things left and right. But having three is something you can unlock. Yeah, certainly. I agree. I agree with you there.
Yeah, that might be a good way to kind of lead players into the fuse system. Like, okay, you can start with two. You can put the rock and the stick together and whatever else together. But once you learn more about the world, once you kind of get used to it, oh yeah, fuse plus. So you can attach maybe three things. It's
Mm,
really hard to imagine more than three, but you never know. This game's got quite a lot of crazy stuff in it. But
yeah.
I'm saying like at least three.
Mm. And like you said, I think not three of everything, just
Hmm,
three things that naturally go together. Yeah.
yes. All right. So, Dale, let's hear your third prediction for Tears of the Kingdom.
Okay, mine's this third one's probably a bit safer than the other two, and it does seed nicely with you talking about Fuse just now. I want to talk about Ultra Hand
Hmm,
a little bit more. I think Ultra Hand, Fuse, Ascend, all of the new abilities, they will be really important in solving puzzles in shrines or whatever the replacement of shrines is in this game.
hmm.
I still think we will have lots of small shrines like in Breath of the Wild. We haven't really had any confirmation of that, but I think that will probably happen. There will be lots of those little miniature puzzles that we need to solve. And yeah, a lot of these will require using the new abilities. And I think Ultra Hand, just having that ability, is such a good puzzle solving mechanic. I
Hmm.
can imagine you're put in a shrine and you have a puzzle to solve, and they just leave you a bunch of items in the room, and you yourself have to figure out which items you need and how they fit together to solve the puzzle. So my third prediction is that Ultra Hand will not only be used just for creating vehicles, but will also be necessary to solve puzzles.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. We can kind of see some more unique, ultra handy kind of things in the latest trailer.
Hmm.
There is this one shot where he's attacking like a bokoblin camp and he shoots something and a bunch of lasers start spinning around.
Yeah, it's a
If,
bit weird.
if you look closely at that, it looks like it has the green goop of the ultra hand stuff.
Mm,
So, right, they've really been focusing on, oh, you can make vehicles with ultra hand, but I think you can definitely go beyond that, like make structures. Think about all the things you can combine together. It won't
mm,
just be, something with wheels. It could be like a house or a platform you need to make in order to solve a puzzle.
mm.
So I think it will be kind of interesting to see if you go into a shrine, they might give you all the pieces for the puzzle. Here are 7 rocks, here are 3 mushrooms, and figure it out.
Yeah,
You're kind of given Lego blocks and you need to solve the puzzle with these Lego blocks. So I think that's
yeah.
something that's really possible.
That kind of thing is just so exciting for me. And as you were saying, not just vehicles but structures too, like buildings. Something else I just thought of was, you could build bridges over a river.
Right.
You could build ramps. So if you've built this vehicle, you can drive it over a bridge or you can drive it over a ramp to see how much air you can get, and you yourself have built that ramp. Yeah, it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. And yeah, no offense to the American or Australian Breath of the Wild players, but the Japanese Breath of the Wild players are on a completely different level. So I'm really
Yeah,
excited to see like what kind of crazy stuff they're going to be able to make.
yeah. I've seen other people talk about there might be potential for sharing blueprints. I I
Oh,
I don't think that's going to happen, but that's something I've seen a lot of people say that they want, is the ability to share blueprints or share your creations online so that
hmm,
people can just copy them or download them. I mean, people can do that themselves just on Twitter, tweet out, okay, I made this out of this, why don't you build it? But I wonder if a lot of people want them to have something built into the game where you can easily share what you've made with other people or share the blueprints of how to make something.
hmm.
For me, that doesn't really feel very Nintendo, but I do love that idea. Just being able to share what you've made with other people. And like you said, some of the Japanese Breath of the Wild players, I know they'll come up with some crazy stuff. So for someone like me who's not that creative, like I played Super Mario Maker. I'm terrible at designing levels, but I love playing the levels that other people have played. And I think it'll be much the same thing here. I'll be terrible at using Ultra Hand, but I would love to use some of the other stuff that people come up with.
Let's take a brief ad break. Today's show is brought to you by EPOS Gaming Audio. With a comprehensive lineup of both wired and wireless headsets, gaming amplifiers, microphones, and webcams, EPOS has everything you need to experience the power of audio. Like their H6 Pro lineup, which features 2 versions, an open or closed headset. The closed headset allows you to tap into exceptionally detailed audio and seals out ambient noise, while the open version delivers natural high-fidelity audio with an incredible soundstage. Both headsets include a magnetic detachable microphone and a sleek design that has no wild RGB configurations, just good design. Listeners can save 15% by visiting eposaudio.com/gaming and entering code EPOSFriend15 at the checkout.
We're the Tokyo Fresh Podcast.
I'm David.
I'm Jordan.
We're a comedy lifestyle podcast diving into the weird and interesting side of Japan.
We often share stories about our lives in Japan, and how you can avoid making the same mistakes.
So if you want to take advice from 2 idiots who have been living here far too long, check out the Tokyo Fresh Podcast.
Only on the Tokyo Beat Network.
And my third prediction, it kind of ties in with yours as well. It's about the shrines. So I think instead of the 120 Sheikah shrines that we had in Breath of the Wild, I think there won't be a replacement in terms of, oh, now there are 120 of this. I think there will still be shrine equivalents, but there'll be several distinct categories. For example, we've seen like these rocks with these green spirals kind of spinning around.
Yeah.
And they haven't really explained what that is, but I do believe that is a shrine equivalent. Like we will touch it and then I guess maybe be warped to the sky or be warped to like a different area.
Oh, okay.
And then it will function like a traditional shrine. However, I don't think it's just those spinny green swirls. Also on the map, you might notice there's these holes with a malice surrounding it. I think that's also a shrine equivalent, but it focuses on something different. Maybe the malice ones are for combat and the swirly ones are puzzles. Because I think one criticism of the shrines in Breath of the Wild is that sometimes you would just pop into a combat shrine.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of the same, the combat shrines. They are useful because, you get really unique items. And I do like fighting the Guardians. However, some people thought, well, they're all the same and, I don't really like them. So I think having these sort of distinct delineations between the types of shrines will be more apparent in this game. So you'll have the puzzle shrines and you'll have the combat, I guess, holes or whatever, and maybe some other things as well. In Breath of the Wild, your completion for the shrine or your reward for the shrine was like the kind of like a heart piece that you could also use for stamina. So you had stamina and hearts that you could fill up. But this time around, I think you're also going to upgrade the battery for all the machines you make.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a separate, I can't imagine like you get one thing and then you can spend it on hearts, stamina, and battery. I think that's kind of odd to me. They're 3 like very distinct things. So I think the battery upgrades will be kind of its own unique shrine-like area.
Yeah.
Or type of gameplay. So yes, I definitely think there'll probably be like 120 of these things, 50 puzzle shrines and 30 combat shrines, and then 20 of the, I guess, the battery shrines or whatever that maybe focus more on like the Ultra Hand creation, like you mentioned earlier. So I think shrines will be kind of remixed this time around.
I love that idea. Something, like you said, whenever I entered a combat shrine in Breath of the Wild, they were probably my least favorite. Combat stuff is probably my least favorite. I prefer the puzzles. And just entering a combat shrine and just seeing a big empty room, it's just like, oh, it's a combat shrine. So it would be nice knowing what you were going to get before you get into it. Not knowing exactly, but knowing if it was going to be a puzzle or a combat. And similarly, the combat shrines, I would enter them not being prepared for them. So I'd be like, oh, it's a combat shrine. Okay, I'll leave and come back later. Where it would be nice, to know that you're going into a combat shrine and then you can be prepared and go into it.
Hmm. All right. So those were our main three predictions, but I've assembled some lightning round predictions.
Mm-hmm.
These are just some questions, and you can expand upon it or you can just say yes or no. But these are some things I'm curious about, and I kind of want to hear your opinion as well.
Okay.
So the first one is the big one. Will Zelda be playable?
No, sadly.
No.
Yeah, I would love her to. I'd love her to be playable, but I'm not seeing it.
I'm leaning no because of her new outfit is just this dress. So it's hard to imagine she's kind of stomping around in
Yeah, I
that
agree.
like pristine white dress. Okay, next question. We saw two new characters in the trailer. A lady with markings, this blonde lady, and a goat or rabbit or dragon guy. People have different opinions on what he looks like. Who do you think these new characters are?
I think they're members of the Zonai.
Hmm.
Yeah, we keep hearing that word Zonai, and I wonder if these are descendants of the Zonai or members of the Zonai in the past. Something to do with the Zonai. That's going to be a big focus of the game.
I definitely agree with that. I've been kind of going back and forth where, I think the lady is an ancient Hylian, and the goat guy, I thought he was Zonai. But then I'm thinking, well, maybe the woman is the Zonai, and the goat guy is a different thing. I've seen some people say, he's a dragon. So maybe he's like a god or like a guardian or something. But I definitely think at least one of them is a Zonai. Who, I'm not sure, but I'm also very curious about how the Zonai play into the story of Tears of the Kingdom, because that's something a lot of people were really interested in. And I thought it was, kind of interesting, but I assume that, the Zonai are only in the game for flavoring in Breath of the Wild. Because I'm sure like Zonai, it comes from Nazo, which means like riddle or mystery in Japanese.
Oh,
that's like,
okay.
That's the origin of their name.
Oh, I
And
hadn't
I'm
thought
thinking,
of that.
oh, yes. They mention it in I think the Creating a Champion book, where they explicitly say, oh, yeah, we put it into the game because we wanted to give the world a sense of mystery.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought it was just pure flavoring. Yeah, there's ancient ruins and weird stuff every now and then, because that's like in our real world and it gives it more character. But so many people latched on to the Zonai and they're like, the Zonai is super important. The Zonai is the key to everything. And I really brushed it off until Tears of the Kingdom, where, actually, they are definitely going to play a huge part in the story.
Yeah, I wonder if it started as just a bit of flavoring, but then, and Tears of the Kingdom was never going to exist. They had no plans for Breath of the Wild 2, but then they thought, okay, let's go with that.
Definitely. Okay, next question. Who is the final boss? Is it just Ganondorf, or will he turn into Ganon, or is it something else?
Oh, that's a good question. I would love it if it just adhered to a bit of tradition, in a sense. Fight Ganondorf, and then he becomes some kind of beast form. I would be very happy with that. Ganondorf, and then like a pig Ganon or a beast Ganon or something like that. For me, that's just a perfect ending.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if you do Ganondorf, he's got to turn into Ganon. Like, that's the Chekhov's gun in the game. So I think there will be Ganon, but I'm sure there's some twist on it, because we did fight Dark Beast Ganon, as he was called in Breath of the Wild, as the final boss. So maybe he's Zonai Ganon or Tears Ganon or some sort of crazy form we haven't seen before. But
yeah,
I definitely think on the screen, you will see the word Ganon.
Yeah, I think so too.
Next question. Are dungeons in the game? And if so, how many?
Okay, I will say 4 or 5. If we consider the Divine Beast from Breath of the Wild as that game's equivalent of dungeons, I think we'll get a similar thing. Maybe 4 or 5 certain things that you're pointed towards, and then one final one at the end. I'd love to see more, but that's what I feel.
I agree 100% with that. I think all the races will have their specific dungeon, like the Zora dungeon and the Gerudo dungeon. So I think they will stick to the 4 big ones, and then the final one, maybe Hyrule Castle again or something else. Next question. Will Demise be in the game in any form?
You know what? I'm going to say yes, because I have another theory that, as a lot of people have said, the Ouroboros on the cover is not just about life, death, past, and future, but it's a circle, and that the Zelda timeline becomes a circle with Tears of the Kingdom. This game is actually set after Breath of the Wild, but before Skyward Sword, and it becomes a complete circle. So Demise, being from Skyward Sword, book and appearing in Tears of the Kingdom would cement that connection. So yeah, that was my 4th prediction I wasn't going to mention, but yeah, that the timeline is a circle. So yeah, let's say Demise will be in it if they are going with the circle timeline theory a lot of people are talking about.
I'm leaning a bit no, but you never know. I also thought the Zonai would never be important, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. More importantly, will Tingle be in the game? Any form of Tingle?
I'm going to say no, just because tonally, I really don't think Tingle goes with Breath of the Wild, and would certainly not really go with Tears of the Kingdom. I'm going to say no. I'd be very surprised to see him. I'm not the kind of person that likes Tingle very much, but yeah, I would say no for Tingle.
I'm kind of leaning no as well. However, one thing that kind of makes me think he has at least a non 0% chance is, well, Tingle, he's got those balloons and he's flying in the sky all the time. So if you want to make a sky Zelda, you put the sky guy in there, put the guy in the balloons. It'd be very jarring if you're skydiving and then you suddenly see Tingle with his balloons just flying around. But I think that would be very funny. So I kind of hope he is in the game, but maybe not.
Be some nice comic relief, I think.
Yes. Will we see to reference Miyazaki, will we see a castle in the sky? Like a full-blown castle? Not just a pillar, not just ruins, but a real deal castle.
Oh, absolutely, yes, if you count Hyrule Castle, because we see it. We see Hyrule Castle lift off the ground and kind of go into the sky. So that is essentially the castle in the sky. Yeah, I'd love to see another one. So yeah, I'll say yes if you count Hyrule Castle.
I think definitely we will. You don't make a bunch of sky islands without putting the Laputa reference, the castle in the sky. We have so many references like Princess Mononoke. The first game was very Princess Mononoke inspired. This one's a bit more Laputa inspired. So, you got to have that huge castle hidden by the clouds. So hopefully they mimic that.
I could see it.
And this is the last lightning round prediction. Do you think Tears of the Kingdom will be a better game than Breath of the Wild?
Yes, I do. Not just because 6 years have passed since Breath of the Wild came out, and they've been working on this game since then. Breath of the Wild was already very good. The team who is involved know exactly what they're doing. Nintendo in general know how to better develop for their own hardware, the Switch now. I think technically, visually, story-wise and gameplay-wise, I think it will be a refinement of and improvement of Breath of the Wild. So I will say yes.
For me, it's really hard to guess that as well, because Breath of the Wild was also a really special game for me. And I kind of wonder, even though you've added so much new things, in that same world, will that hamper discovery a little bit? Because I already know where the Gerudo Desert is. I already know like some of my favorite spots. In the trailer, we saw that peninsula that's like shaped like a spiral. In Breath of the Wild, you need to carry like a ball around the spiral.
Oh yeah,
and put it in and to get it to a shrine. And I really remember that gameplay segment in Breath of the Wild and how shocking it was to find this weird overworld puzzle. So I'm a little worried that, well, even though they added a ton of stuff, maybe the gameplay is better and more free, but I do kind of wonder if it will capture the same spirit of exploration that Breath of the Wild did. But even if it's half as good as Breath of the Wild, it will still be one of the greatest games ever made. So I can't really fret if it is like a bit lower than Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I think it will be like a better game, but it won't have as much impact. Breath of the Wild felt so new and so fresh. It probably won't have that exact feeling of joy and discovery, as you said. So I agree with you there.
Final question. I assume the game is going to start off in the sky, and once you complete the tutorial, like the Sky Islands might be a Great Plateau equivalent. After you finish that, you will be able to skydive to the surface. Have you picked out the first place you're going to go?
First place I'm going to go. I think it would be fun to retrace your steps of the original game. And if you go back to Breath of the Wild, I believe there's a feature where you can see your path through the game.
Yes.
I would love to do something similar, is think, okay, when I started Breath of the Wild, where did I go first? And then play Tears of the Kingdom and go, okay, let's see if we can retrace our steps in the same way. I remember I first went to Zora's domain just randomly when you're told to go and seek out the 4 races. The first one I found was a Zora. So if we're doing that same kind of thing of I'll seek out the 4 races, I would go for the Zora first, I think. Or if not, I might just go to Zora's domain because I have such a strong memory of that because that was the first place that I went to. So I would love to do that again.
Yeah, for me, I'm really tempted to go to Hateno first because I'm quite curious about those mushrooms. Like, why are they there? So I might just make a beeline for there and get maybe like a mushroom hat or something and figure out what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, those were our predictions. Some really awesome predictions from Dale, and mine were a bit more safe, but hopefully you also enjoyed listening to them. So, Dale, thanks for joining me. Where can people find you?
Oh, thank you very much for having me. People can find me on YouTube, Dale Plays Games, where I'm reviewing Nintendo games. If you're interested in life in Japan, Japanese culture, beautiful Japanese landscapes, my other channel is called Open World Japan. Also on Twitter, Instagram, Dale_DPG.
Great. And listeners, the links to everything will be in the podcast description. Dale, once again, thanks for joining me.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me on the show. It was a great time.
This episode's feature is about the brand spanking new arcade / bar / restaurant / general entertainment zone, Namco Tokyo. It opened up just a few weeks ago in the massive new entertainment complex, Tokyu Kabukicho Tower. Located in, you guessed it, Kabukicho, aka Shinjuku's party district. In the Like a Dragon series, a major plot point is the Yakuza trying to secure land for the construction of a massive tower. Well, life imitates art because that's exactly what this is. They don't look the same, but I don't know, it's pretty close. The 48-floor skyscraper has a bold design that looks like ocean waves in the sky. The exterior is a glassy blue, so it blends in pretty well with the sky, and at night, you can see the top wave part lit up. I'm no architectural expert, but it does look unique, and it's not just some bland slab. It could be the final level of a JRPG, and I say that as a compliment. I'm mostly going to focus on the Namco Tokyo part, but it's hard to ignore the rest since it's undoubtedly going to be a major tourist hotspot. It's a place that fully embraces Kabukicho's reputation of being gaudy, loud, and a place fueled by alcohol and fun. A lot of tourist guides are going to push this place pretty hard, and since Kabukicho is already on the itinerary for so many Tokyo travelers, this becomes one of the more standout locations to visit in the area. But if you love games, Namco Tokyo is probably going to be the most interesting aspect of the tower. I'd go so far as to say it's probably a sneak peek into the future of modern Japanese arcades. Kind of in a bad way in terms of video games, but it does seem like an evolution of the current Japanese chain arcades you can find all over Tokyo. The first floor on the tower is a hotel entrance and also kabuki burgers and tacos. Did I eat there? Of course. Their main dish is the kabuki burger, which has a beef patty, veggie tempura, and barbecue sauce. I thought this was actually quite good and more unique than other burger joints, but it's 1,900 yen for a burger with no fries. You gotta throw in some fries. That automatically points off if you don't include them. But most people will enter the tower from the second floor, as the escalators on both sides drop you off here. Once inside the building, all your senses will be assaulted with loud music and the bright decorations of Kabuki Hall. It mimics a yokocho, a small side street filled with vendors and restaurants you can find in many places across Japan. There's about 10 restaurants here, mostly Japanese food, but also some Korean and Chinese as well. Think of it as just a big food court with a lot of lantern decorations and neon signs. And I hope you like neon, cause that's the name of the game here. One floor up is Namco Tokyo. What's kind of fun about the layout of these two floors is that there's a giant hole in the middle, so you can see the second floor from the third floor and vice versa. It's designed more like an American mall that way, instead of a typical Japanese department store where every floor is closed off. It definitely feels like a big party, with people eating and drinking below and people playing games above. And I think that's the vibe the whole building is trying to give off. It's a party area, albeit a bit more structured and clean than what you'd find in the actual streets of Kabukicho. Namco Tokyo is fairly similar to the recent Bandai Namco Cross stores, which I've talked about on the podcast. One opened up in Yokohama last year, and another in Tokyo just last month. Now there's Namco Tokyo, which is technically different, but they share a lot of similarities in that it's multiple things in one. Namco Tokyo is far more ambitious though, as it's not just a collection of stores, but also a massive arcade and bar. A barcade, if you will. Though you can completely skip the whole eating and drinking aspect and just focus on the games. When you arrive on the third floor, you're immediately overwhelmed with a big neon Namco Tokyo sign and hundreds of gashapon machines, or capsule machines. There's this gashapon pod that you can enter, and there's many other machines on the outside as well. Pod is maybe a bad way to describe it, but it's a tiny round room that you can enter. And above this pod room is a neon billboard that showcases a lot of Namco's IPs. Yes, someone built a place where you can find Mappy running around in 2023. The gashapon area is, well, do you like gashapon? If so, you'll enjoy it. If not, you'll ignore it. There's actually relatively few gaming-related gashapon machines, and most of the ones that are gaming-related are just Pokemon and Kirby. But I'm always bewildered by just how popular these places have become in the last few years. When I moved to Tokyo in 2017, there was no real place to go and buy gashapon. Akihabara had a few bespoke areas, but now you have Bandai Namco making these huge stores filled with hundreds of machines all over Tokyo. Once you push your way past the capsule area, you're greeted with the arcade portion. By arcade, I mostly mean claw catchers, UFO, crane games. These types of machines really dominate modern Japanese arcades. Most of the chain arcades have the very casual focused games, like the crane games on the first floor, with the real deal video games on the higher levels. But if an arcade is only one floor, like this one, it'll be all crane games and maybe Mario Kart Arcade and Taiko no Tatsujin. Namco Tokyo does have 2 video games though. Can you guess? Yes, Mario Kart and Taiko. If you came here hoping for some rounds of Tekken or to experience the long lineage of great Namco arcade games, well, this is not for you. You're here to play crane games and maybe a bit of Mario Kart. If you're a crane game junkie, let me lay out how Namco Tokyo is a bit special. All the machines look incredibly pristine. I mean, it just opened up, so I'd hope so, but they're all uniform in their aesthetic with these white cab designs and bright lights on the inside. It certainly feels like you're in a futuristic arcade. It's great for photos, great for walking around, great for Instagram. There's a pretty large variety of crane games here. You've got the tiny ones, which are my personal favorite since they're easier, and the bigger ones that have plushies. There's even a giant crane game called Big Crane filled with plush sharks. The price for this giant crane game? 500 yen for one try. I hope you have a good strategy or else you're out of a good 7-Eleven dinner. The normal size crane games are also 200 yen, which is double what they normally are at, say, a Gigo or Taito Game Station. Again, this place is very tourist focused, so it's going to suck out some extra yen from your pocket. 200 yen for one try is pretty crazy though. You really got to get it in one shot to feel like it's worthwhile. Next to the big crane is one of the more interesting items in the arcade, Gashapon Odyssey. This is a one-of-a-kind machine that's kind of like an AR video game, but also just a big Gashapon machine. It's shaped like a big triangle, and you control characters on the LED screen with the giant wheel that looks like it's from a yacht. You spin it around a bit, and then you're given a unique gacha figure. The price for this experience? 1,000 yen. So you can either have 2 stabs at the big crane or 1 play here. At least here, you are guaranteed something, but the figures are normal sized. I was hoping for like a giant Gashapon capsule instead. Can't lie, I was tempted, but I didn't have 2 500 yen coins, so I just watched somebody else do it. This seems like it's for hardcore Gashapon fans or tourists who are drawn into the allure of the big wheel. And as a side note, there actually is a big Gashapon machine that you can put empty capsules into. You put your capsule into the slot and then turn a huge dial to get rid of it. This certainly beats just having a trash can filled with empty plastic. Beyond the crane game area is the aforementioned Mario Kart and Taiko. I visited the arcade twice, and the first time they had these Taiko performers there showing off. And I mean Taiko the video game, not traditional Taiko musicians. I have no idea if they were from Bandai or just some sort of performance troupe they hired, but if someone's really good at Taiko, they normally draw an audience. Next to the Taiko machine is the Evangelion VR experience. This has been in a few other areas, such as the Bandai Namco Cross Store in Yokohama, but you put on VR goggles and then pilot an Eva. I haven't tried it yet, but on paper, it sounds awesome. The pods you sit in look very reminiscent of the ones from the anime. I think it's around 1,200 yen or so. Again, Namco Tokyo is not exactly a cheap experience if you do everything. The second part of the venue shifts gears away from video games. Here you've got other Bandai Namco staples like an Ichiban Kuji store and a row of tables where you can partake in the One Piece card game. I'm not sure if these tables are just for show or you need to reserve, but yeah, nobody was using them. You can buy some cards here though, and one of the more unusual items is the live label drink tag. You buy one for 800 yen, and then the tag, which looks like a One Piece card, is then put onto an aluminum can filled with oolong tea. I know what I just said barely makes any sense, but it's just a can of oolong tea with a special label on it. These sort of things are a little popular in Japan recently. I went to a Blue Bottle coffee pop-up shop that prints off custom labels with your name on it, but here it's just a picture of a One Piece card. You do you though if you're interested in it. If you don't want to drink some oolong tea, there is a drink area where you can grab some beer or soft drinks and then bring it to the bar area to pay. Everything here is at least 500 yen, even a bottle of Fanta. Now, if you want something fancy, they do have some cocktails. Missed opportunity here though, none are Namco themed. But someone did step up in terms of food because there are a few different things you can order if you want to eat something, including 2 Pac-Man themed items. There's the 1,200 yen Pac-Man curry, where the sauce is shaped like Pac-Man. Think of it like a big wall of rice with a Pac-Man shaped hole in the middle. But if you've got money to burn, you can also enjoy the 2,800 yen Pac-Man parfait. I can't really tell what's in it, but you've got the jelly version of Pac-Man and the Ghost, some strawberries, some chocolate cubes. I think it looks better than it tastes. But is this the first ever parfait you can buy at an arcade? Maybe. If you're curious as to what the most expensive item is, that would be the Brute, which sets you back 30,000 yen, or about $300 US. After you order, there is a restaurant-like setting in the back with a bunch of tables. It wasn't so crowded though, since most people are here for the games and not the food. On the back wall is a virtual DJ. Yes, this place truly has everything. I want to say they rotate the DJ out every now and then, and there will be events featuring different DJs, but when I went, it was just some generic robot. It really should just be Pac-Man, right? DJ Pac-Man. Also, inside the restaurant area is an AR game where you hold up a champagne glass and watch champagne get poured into it. My wife played it and it was pretty funny, and it's free, so 2 minutes well spent. I'm pretty sure that's everything. There was an exhibit on the same floor, but I'm not sure if it's actually connected to Namco Tokyo or if it's a different thing. It wasn't a Namco property, so maybe it's separate, but we might get some more game exhibits in the future. Before I wrap up the feature, I'll briefly go over what's on the other floors. The 4th floor is actually the Tokyo Matrix, which is an escape game, another thing that's pretty popular in the city. Above that are more restaurants, a gelato place, just general things like that. The 17th floor actually has a terrace where you can get a nice view of Shinjuku. Tocho it ain't, but sometimes you don't want to be too high. Tokyu Kabukicho Tower as an entertainment venue. Hard to say if I'll be returning here again and again. It has a movie theater and some live concert halls inside the tower, but as somebody who's more into shopping and eating, those aspects are pretty limited. It'll definitely draw in tourists though, so that'll keep it going for a while. I said earlier that Namco Tokyo feels like the future of Japanese arcades, and the future isn't more video games, sad to say. It's a focus on a different, more casual entertainment option. Doubling down on crane games, adding some merch shops, and maybe even a drink area. I can see the other chain arcades trying something like this down the line. We might have fewer but bigger and more trendy style arcades 10 or 20 years from now. A bit scary for those who, want to just play King of Fighters, but turning arcades into a general entertainment venue that's tourist friendly is definitely going to be a big trend sooner than later. That's it for the feature. Now let's look at the news. Have I talked about Zelda enough this episode? Let's get into a few more tidbits. Now that we've had the final trailer, they popped the cork on the marketing bottle, and we've got a bevy of news and collabs for Tears of the Kingdom. Download cards for the games are now available in Japan. Oddly, it actually features 2 completely new screenshots that haven't been in the other marketing material. This is pretty rare for download cards, so I'm not sure why Zelda is the exception. Nintendo Tokyo also announced the first wave of Tears of the Kingdom merch. Shirts, posters, towels, tumblers, ties, that typical stuff. I was hoping for something a bit more unusual or distinct, like all the weird Pikmin merch we got recently, but the stuff here is pretty plain, just with the Zelda logo slapped on it. The t-shirt is pretty disappointing, it just has the Tears of the Kingdom logo. I was hoping we'd get the new Zonai designs on a shirt, like the Sheikah ones for Breath of the Wild, but I will obviously go to Nintendo Tokyo after this stuff releases to see it with my own eyes. If you want cooler merch though, Ichiban Kuchi has you covered with a new raffle starting May 9th. The ultimate prize is a corrupted Master Sword Light. There's some mugs, Korok keychains, plates shaped like rupees. This is the kind of weird stuff I want to see at Nintendo Tokyo. I'll definitely grab a ticket and see what I end up with. This raffle will be held at Lawson, which will also have special spicy chicken in a Zelda container. That's basically it. Just the cardboard box it comes with will have Link on it. Will I buy it solely for this reason? Of course. And the last bit of cool marketing is that there will be a Zelda-themed Splatfest on May 3rd to the 5th. Power versus Wisdom versus Courage. I really love these crossover Splatfests. The Pokemon one was the best one so far. This time around, the map is actually shaped like the Triforce, so they are going all in on the theme. Spoiler alert, but my feature for the first post-Tears of the Kingdom episode will be all about the fun Zelda things to do in Tokyo, so look forward to it. Now for the Sega section. They bought Angry Birds developer Rovio for $775 million. The goal is to expand Sega's mobile offerings. I'm very curious as to what this entails, because if they want to leverage their IPs, I think it would be easier just to license them to mobile game developers instead of buying Rovio. I guess the Angry Birds can be in Monkey Ball now? This news is a bit perplexing as obviously there's a lot of things you can do with $700 million. The entire industry is acquisition happy these days, which certainly makes me a bit nervous as we've yet to see the benefits of a ton of companies being consolidated under one. I actually do enjoy a few of those Angry Bird games, but apparently they've been riddled with microtransactions, so hopefully that's not a peek into the future of whatever Sega wants to do with their mobile games. The more important Sega news, of course, is that 4 new games were added to Genesis NSO: Flicky, Kid Chameleon, Street Fighter II, and Pulseman. Pulseman is by far the most interesting one. It came to the Sega channel in the West, then hit the Virtual Console on the Wii in 2009. 14 years later, you can play it on your Switch. This is a pre-Pokemon title from Game Freak and features some excellent Ken Sugimori art. He also served as the co-director. And fun history fact, this is the last game Game Freak released before Pokemon took over the world. I'd say it's a pretty solid platformer. The gimmick is that you can build up attacks through momentum, and you can bounce around the levels in electricity form. If you've got NSO, definitely give it a look. The graphics and art alone are worth it. Well, let's wrap it up. Thanks as always for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app. Leave a 5-star review as well. It helps with visibility. This podcast is also available on YouTube, so like and subscribe there as well. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Just search for Tokyo Game Life or find the links in the podcast description. If you like the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends and on social media. If there's anything you want me to talk about or cover, don't be shy. Just message me on Twitter. Next episode will be on May 7th. See you next time. Matane!